we're going to do equations of lines. So what does an equation of a line mean? You have something there.
Hmm?
You have something right there.
I know, but
Okay.
it's also still on section 5. On the screen above you.
Change.
Hey.
Magical. What have we discussed so far? We've discussed formulas for slope, distance, midpoint. We looked at equation of lines. When I say equation of line, what formula pops up in your head?
Next plus B.
Mx plus b. Yeah, that's what everybody hears whenever they see equation. Here's an equation of a line. That's what comes in their mind. There are actually 3 formulas, and we'll talk about each one of those as we go along. Well, let's go ahead and start by discussing the equations of lines. There are 3 different forms of EOLs. They all begin from the same equation. What equation is that? It's the equation of slope, yeah. This is the slope equation. All equations of lines come from there. Let's derive them. So, as a general rule, whenever you're solving, how do we know we're supposed to solve for something in this equation? There's an equal sign. Whenever you see an equal sign, that means you're supposed to solve for something. You have the numerators, they stay together, and the denominators, they have to stay together. So whenever you have an equation, a rational equation that has a fraction on one side and an equal sign somewhere, the first step is get rid of the fractions. How do you get rid of the fractions? Multiply by the least common denominator. So what is the least common, the LCD here? What's the only D denominator? Oh, let's see. You have the numerator, denominator. So what's the only denominator? There's a whole bunch more than that. This whole thing is the denominator. This whole thing, everything below this line is the denominator. So I got to multiply both sides by the denominator to get rid of it. So this equation and that equation cancel. Leaving me with this. But in an equation, you notice like y equals mx plus b. In an equation, you have to have at least the x and y variable inside there, because that's where we plot on the graph. Here we have 2 y's and 2 x's. So we don't need the x2. That's going to be the like here. That's going to be the x and the y part. Because in order to find the equation of a line, you need 2 things. You need a point and a slope. That's what we have here. You have a point, which is x1, y1, and you have a slope, m. So since you have a point and the slope, this one is called the point slope formula. So it's y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. These disappear. The twos disappear. Because in your equation, you have to have an x variable and a y variable. Remember, x1, y1 are solid numbers. They're a point in your graph. M is a solid number. It's the slope of your graph. So that's the first formula of equation of a line. So let's pretend we have a point. Let's say we have 2, 3 is my point, and my slope is 4. In our point slope formula, this represents x1, this represents y1. So we have y minus 3, m is 4, x minus x1 is 2. Don't bother looking for it in your notes. It won't be in there. Spend more time listening to this instead of trying to follow me on these sheets, because I'm going to be jumping around. Well, yeah, as I'm saying, it's because there's a whole bunch of stuff missing from these things. I'm connecting the dots for you. So what we do, we're trying to get to the form y equals mx plus b. So what we have to do now is solve for y. So when we solve for y, what do we have to do first? Get rid of the parentheses. We get rid of the parentheses by distributivity. We have y minus 3. Positive times positive is positive. 4 times x is 4x. Positive times negative is negative. 4 times 2 is 8. Learn to separate the signs from the numbers. It'll decrease the number of mistakes you make in sign errors. Then we have to get rid of the 3. That's a minus 3, so I have to get rid of it by the opposite. Add 3 to both sides. Y equals 4x. Negative 8 plus 3. Since 8 is bigger than 3, it's negative. The answer is negative. 8 minus 3 is 5. This is our second form. 4 is our slope. And negative 5, if we set x equal to 0, if we set x equal to 0, we solve for y, we get the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is negative 5. This is m, and this is the y-intercept, which we call b. This form is the slope intercept form. Because it has the slope and it has the y-intercept. And there's a difference between the y-intercept and the location and y-intercept in the equation. So we'll talk about those in a second. So that's the second form. We have the point slope, the slope intercept. Now, starting off from the third, there's the second one. To get the third one, x and y must be on the same side. And A has to be positive. So to get x and y on the same side, we subtract 4x from both sides. We have y minus 4x equals -5. X usually goes first, so we move them around by the commutativity property. Is A positive? No, A is whatever the coefficient of X is. That one has to be positive. Since that one's negative, I change all of the signs across the equation. So that -4x becomes a positive 4x. The positive y becomes a negative y, and -5 becomes 5. This is our third form. It's called the standard form. The standard form is represented ax plus by equals c. Where whatever's in front of the x is your a, b is in front of the y, and c is the constant by itself. Where the only stipulation is a has to be greater than 0, has to be positive. Those are your three forms of equations. All right, let's look at example 1. A line has slope -7.9 and the y-intercept 0.16. Find the equation of the line. Whenever you see the instruction equation of the line, that usually represents this, unless otherwise indicated. Whenever you're given a problem in mathematics or any STEM course, actually, and it asks you to find something specific that requires a formula, always start off by putting the formula down first. You know what you're trying to get to. You know what you need. You need to have a slope, and you have to have, what's this one called? The y-intercept. So it says our slope. It's given that our slope is -7/9. And the y-intercept, notice, if I ask you for the y-intercept, it's 0.16. Why is it 0.16 in this case? Why is the y-intercept? How do we know if this wasn't there? How do we know that's the y-intercept? Because the x is 0. Remember, to find the y-intercept, we set x equals 0 and solve for y. So whenever x is 0, whatever y is the y-intercept. And conversely, if y is 0, whatever x is your x-intercept. And we talked about that in the first day of class, or in the first section. So since it says y-intercept, it's b equals 16. So all we do now is just plug and play. Y has to be there. Y and x have to be in there because that's what defines an equation. M is -7/9 x plus b is 16. There's your equation of a line. Example 2 is just a little bit different now. Example 2 says a line has slope -2/3 and contains the point -3, 6. Find the equation of the line. And here are your steps. First, write the formula that you need. In this case, since we're looking for equation of a line, we have to use y equals mx plus b. This tells us that we need an m, the slope, and the letter b, which is the y-intercept. We're given the slope equals -2/3 and a point, -3, 6. To find an equation of a line, you need a point and the slope. So you need these two things. Which one of those do we have? We have both of them. Okay, so what do we do with those? Plug m and xy into the equation. And solve for B. Since we don't have B, we have to find it. So plug in your slope and your point into the equation. So we're going to plug in Y. We have M and we have X. We have to find B. So here's X and here's Y. We have 6 equals -2/3. That's my M. And my X is -3 plus B. So we plugged in our slope and our X and Y. Now we got to find B. Now, in general, whenever you have fractions in an equation, the first thing you do, can you simplify it? Can it be reduced to anything at that? Negative and a negative cancel. The 3's cancel because this number is actually 3/1. So since the 3's in opposite direction, opposite sides, we can get rid of those. So we have this becomes 2 plus B. Solve for B. Subtract 2 from both sides. So B is equal to 4. And we know that M is equal to -2/3. Now, plug M and B into your equation, and you're done. You have an equation of a line. So M is -2/3. X stays there. And B is +4. And there's your equation of a line. Any questions? You want me to show you the other way you could do it? Or is one way good enough for you? You want to see the other way? Okay. The other way you could do it. Okay. We're given a point, which is -3/6. And the slope, which is -2/3. So we can use the point slope form. Because we're given a point and the slope, we can use the point slope. What does the point slope form look like? So what is x1? What is x1? What is y1? What is m? Well, in the point, this is x1 and this is y1 and this is m. Just plug those in your equation. Y minus 6 equals -2/3 x minus -3. Once you do this, now just solve for y. And now it sounds like it's less steps, but whenever you deal with fractions, you deal with a lot of more things to worry about, especially if the fractions are negative, because now you have to worry about negatives and fractions. So I'll show you how to work around that part. So we have y minus 6 equals -2/3. So here, since we have two negatives next to each other, inside, we have to do order of operations, so do inside the parentheses. So we do inside here first. Negative and negative becomes a positive. Order of operations always has to be followed. So can we do anything inside the parentheses? Yes, we can do this. Now, whenever you have fractions and an equal sign, do the following. How many terms are in this equation? First off, before we go anywhere, how many terms? No. No. Let's keep on going lower. 3. Because remember, a term is anything separated by plus, minus, or equals. So here's one term. There's a minus. Here's another term. There's equal. This is all one number, because this parenthesis makes this a number and it's multiplied. So this is one term by itself. So we only have 3 terms. So find the LCD, the least common denominator. So the LCD in our case is what? 3. It's the only denominator we have. It's the only denominator. So find the LCD first. Multiply the LCD to each term. So in other words, in this first one, multiply 3 times y. This is another term. 3 times 6 equals 3 times this whole thing here. -2/3 x plus 3. So, bless you. So in other words, once you know how many terms you have, just put parentheses around them and put the LCD in front of it. Third step. Reduce. Because remember, in order to find the LCD, you have to have a fraction somewhere. The only fraction we have is right here. So this 3 and this 3 cancel. And we know it has to cancel because this is the LCD. It has to be part of the denominator there. Step 4 is multiply to remove the parentheses. So we have 3 times y is 3y. Minus 3 times 6 is 18. Okay, this is one. So now we just have what's inside there. Because the coefficient is gone, so we don't need the parentheses over there anymore. Are all the parentheses gone? No, so we got to do this one again. Negative times positive is negative. 2 times x is 2x. Negative times positive is negative. 2 times 3 is 6. And the last step, solve for y. So what do we have to move first? Have to move the 18. Whenever you're solving for something, always get rid of it's just the opposite of the order of operations. Get rid of the plus and minuses first. So here's a negative 18. So we add 18 to both sides. So we have 3y equals negative 2x. 18 is bigger than 6, so the number's positive. 18 minus 6 is 12. And the last step, since it's multiplication, we divide each term by 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And there's your answer. That's the other way. You could use the formulas. But that one obviously requires a lot more math if you have fractions. We know this is correct because there's our slope that we started off with. What do y'all think? Doable? You just have to be very careful when you do these things. Signs are going to hurt you a lot. All right. Since we're looking for equations of lines. Okay, well, let's do another example here real quick. That's not like that one. Because with this last example, I gave you a point and a slope. What if find the equation of the line going through 2, 5, and 3, 9. If I gave you 2 points, the last one I gave you a point and a slope. This one I give you 2 points. Remember what we said earlier? To find the equation of a line, you need a point and a slope. So to find the equation of a line, you need a point and a slope. Do we have those? No. Can we get those? Yes. We have a point. We have 2 of them, actually. We choose either one we want. So the first thing we have to do if given 2 points, find M, find the slope first. What's the formula for slope?
y2 minus y1 over x2. um,
Very good, very good. So we label our points x1, x2, y1, y2. X1 is 2. X2 is 3. Y1 is 5. Y2 is 9. So now we just plug them in there. Y2 is 9. Y1 is 5. X2 is 3. X1 is 2. 9 minus 5 is 4. 3 minus 2 is 1. So the slope is equal to 4. So there's our slope. Plug in x1, x2, y1, y2. Then choose either of the points. This is really the only free choice you have in this process. Which point are you going to use? Always look for the easier ones. Which ones are easy? The ones that don't have negatives. If they have zeros in there, always use those because they get rid of some of the variables. But since they're both positive numbers, which one's easier to use? Let's use 2 and 5. So here's our x value and here's our y value. Now we have a point and a slope. Use the point slope formula, which is y equals mx plus b. To find b. So our m is 4, our point is 2, 5. So y is what?
5.
5. M is, x is, and then we find b. Since there are no fractions, we're good to go. 4 times 2 is 8. Solve for b. Eight is bigger than 5, it's negative, so the answer is negative. 8 minus 5 is 3. So b equals -3. Plug m and b into your equation, and you're done. So the b is -3, the m is 4. So y equals 4 times x plus -3. 4 times x. You opposite signs becomes a negative. There's your answer. So it's only thing different than the first example we had is I didn't give you the point and the slope. I gave you 2 points. You find the slope, repeat the process. So far, so good. Because B was -3. The formula is MX plus B. So B, I have to put in -3 in there. Since this is actually a multiplication, it's +1 times -3, which makes it a positive times negative is a negative. So that's if I give you a point and a slope or 2 points. What if I give you a point and another equation? This is still finding equations of lines. If I give you a point and another equation. There are 4 things that can happen. 4 possible outcomes. Remember, you have to find an equation of a line, and I'm giving you an equation of a line. So if you have 2 lines, this is line 1 and this is line 2. 2 lines can be that way. What are these called? Parallel lines. The symbol we use, instead of having right parallel, you can just put that little symbol there, 2 little marks.
Would they be split?
Yeah. If you did it up and down, like 2 L's. Now this is just two, just, in other words, I could say like this is 2 lines are parallel if blah, blah, blah. So it'll save you some writing time. We haven't talked about this yet. It'll come later, but since these lines will never cross because they're parallel, so they have no solutions. We'll talk about solutions in another section. Remember, we're talking about lines. So when we're talking about lines, we have this equation we got to use. Using that equation, what do we know about both of these lines? They have to have the same slope. So the slope of line 1 equals the slope of line 2. What else do we know? What about them? No, but how are they related? We know the slopes are equal. What do we know about the y-intercepts? They have to be different. They have to be different. Because if the slopes are the same, they have to be different. That's how we know they're never going to cross. So they have no solutions. Well, as opposed to this is line 1, this is line 2. If they're the same line, again, don't try to look through your sheets to find what I'm doing. It'd be easier if you just listen and then look at those later. So what do we know if it's the same line? How many solutions does it have? infinite number of solutions because each point is a solution. Yeah, it's always gonna be the same. So no, because remember, solution is where they intersect. Since they're the same line, every point intersects. That's why I have infinite number of solutions. If they're the same line, what do we know about the slopes in the y-intercept? The same. So the slope of line 1 equals the slope of line 2, and the y-intercepts of slope 1 has to equal the slope of intercept of line 2. So if you have two equations and they have the same slopes, what distinguishes them is if the y-intercepts are the same or different. So that's if the slopes are the same. What if the slopes are different? Two possibilities occur here. Here's line 1, here's line 2. If they cross at 90-degree angles, in other words, they create a right angle. If that happens, then we say they're perpendicular. Perpendicular. Which we just write as an upside down T. How many solutions they have there? Yeah, because where they cross, one solution. We obviously see the slopes cannot be the same as opposed as like this one. This one has one solution also. And that's any other one. When they intersect at one point, they can either be a perpendicular, means they cross at right angles, or they could be any other angle. What can we say about the y-intercept? What if the y-intercept is at that point? They're gonna be the same. So in this case, this one here is if the slopes are the same. If the slopes are different, then the y-intercept doesn't matter because they can cross on the y-axis. So the only way we can tell these guys apart is in perpendicular lines, the slopes are negative reciprocals of each other. They're negative flips. So they have to have opposite signs and they have to be flips of each other. And anything else is just says they have different slopes. So this is very important because if I tell you the line is perpendicular to this, then you know I give you an equation, you know its slope. You have to find the perpendicular slope. That's your line. And that's what we're going to work on next. Here's some examples. I'm going to give you a slope. You're going to give me the slope parallel and the slope perpendicular. Here's the first one. What's that? What's the slope parallel? Look what I just put here. If the slopes, if it's parallel, what are the slopes? Yeah, if it's parallel, the slopes are equal. So the slope parallel is also -3. What's the slope perpendicular? Remember, two conditions occur. What are they? They have to be different signs, and they have to be flips of each other. Almost. What does this really look like? It's every number is a rational number. So this one, change the sign, so it's positive. Flip this one. I see. Okay, if I gave you 2/5, what's the slope parallel? 2/5, because it's the same slope. Now perpendicular. Okay, I'll take change sign and flip. -5/2. Very good.
Would you want to simplify that or leave it as it is?
Leave it as is. Never simplify. I mean, simplify if it was like 8/4. Yes, you'd simplify, but do not change this to decimal of any sort or a mixed number. Because the slope, what does the slope tell you? Rise over run. It has to be in fraction form. If they're perpendicular, you just flip it and change the signs. Two things you have to do. Because think of it this way. A positive slope looks like this. A negative slope looks like this. So you have to have different slopes. But the only way they're perpendicular is if they're the same numbers, just flipped and change signs. How about if I give you 0? What does this line look like if the slope is 0? Very good, but what does it look like? What's the line going to look like?
Straight across the x-axis.
Remember, all lines are straight. So you can't say they're straight. What is it like?
X-axis.
No. Parallel to, no, it's only one line. Can't be parallel. If the slope is 0, you're right, but you use the wrong words. Horizontal or vertical?
I know one of them is 0, but one of them is.
Yes, now which one's which? Which one's which?
I can't tell the difference most of the time.
Okay, let's look at the difference. You're right though. It's either one's either gonna be horizontal or vertical. Let's look at this one if it's horizontal. And this one it's vertical. It crosses at 3. And this one. No. Well, I don't know yet. Let's find out. So if it's horizontal, let's say we need 2 points. If it's horizontal, this is -2 and this is 1. And they both cross at 3. So what's the slope of this line? Remember, it's y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. So what is y2? Okay, what's the point? What are the point locations? -2, 3, 1, 3.
Why will be
3, 3 minus 3. X is 1 minus -2. So this is positive. So we have 0/3, which is 0. How many times is 3 going to 0? No, 0 times. So if the slope is 0, that means you have the same y values. It's a horizontal line. And the equation of that line is y equals, in this case, it's whatever the y value is. All 4 of these things. It's obviously the equation of the line is this one because it's a horizontal line. The y's are the same. The slope is 0. So I can give you any of those words in a sentence, in a word problem. I say, instead of saying the slope is 0, I can say that you have a horizontal line. If I tell you that the line's horizontal, you automatically know the slope is 0. If I say find the equation, if I gave you this, what's the equation of that line?
That, right,
Yeah, because there can't be an x in there because it doesn't cross the x-axis. It can only have the variable if it crosses that axis. Since it never crosses the x-axis, it can never have an x. And the only axis it crosses is at -2. So that's a horizontal line. The y's are the same. The equation is the y equals whatever the y value is. And the slope is 0. Let's look at vertical lines. What's the slope of this one? Y, okay, here's, let's call, what's this location? 1, so it's 3, 3, 3, -2. So what's y2? Okay, well, it doesn't matter which one, it's always going to be the same. Minus y1. Yeah, so this is x1, y1, or x2, y2. This is x1, y1. What's x2?
3.
X1 is 3. So we have -5/0. How many times does 0 go into -5? Infinitely. So it's undefined. If the slope is undefined, it's a vertical line. How do you know it's going to be a vertical line? Same x values. The equation of a vertical line is x equals whatever that number is. In this case, since it crosses through 3, that's my equation of a line. Because it has no y values in it. It never crosses the y-axis. How about this one? If I gave you this line, what's the EOL of that one? Just 0? X equals 0. Think about that. The vertical axis is the equation x equals 0. The horizontal axis is the equation y equals 0. But that's neither here nor there. This, yeah, well, it's part of the lecture now. It was supposed to be a review, but that's okay. Whoever asked me that, I think I'm glad you did. This needed to be gone over. Why? Because this little short stuff here, you'll see it in word problems in vertical and horizontal lines. And it doesn't have to, it could be any one of these. It could tell you what is the equation of the vertical line going through this point. So I say, what's the equation of the line of the equation of the vertical line going through the point 2, 5? What's the equation of the vertical line going through the point 2, 5?
X equals 2.
X equals 2, right? Because it's vertical. If it's vertical, then the equation is whatever the x value is. Since the x value is 2, x equals 2 is the equation. Let's go back to this. If the slope is 0, what is the slope parallel? Also 0. What's the slope perpendicular?
In front of the 0, but still 0.
No.
What is not?
Okay, what is 1 over 0? Undefined. Very good. Because remember, all numbers are fractions. 0 over 1 is 0. But when I flip it, it becomes 1 over 0, which is undefined. So whenever you see the word undefined, that means that you have a 0 on the bottom. Okay, if the slope is undefined, what's the parallel? What's perpendicular? 0. Because if it's undefined, it's 1 over 0. And the flip of it is 0 over 1. And 0 cannot have a sign. All right, let's look at example 4. A, tell me if they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Y plus 2 equals 5x. And 5y plus x equals negative 15. Are they parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Don't be afraid. Spit it out. It's a 33.333% chance of getting it right. You say? Okay, this is math. You can't just say it is, you have to show me it is. How would you show me if they're perpendicular or parallel? What do we have to compare it to each other? What did that chart just tell me, show you? We have to know what about the two lines? The slopes and the y-intercepts, exactly. Because everything we talked about in this chart, if the slope is parallel, I mean, if the slopes are equal, it's one of these two. If the slopes are different, it's one of these two. So if I give you two lines, you can't just tell by looking at them. You have to put them in the form y equals mx plus b and compare the slopes. So what's the first one going to do? I subtract 2. So y equals 5x minus 2. And this one? Get rid of the x first. So we have 5y equals negative x minus 15. Next step. Divide
Five.
each term by 5. Very good. Fifteen divided by 3. 5 is 3. So what's the slope of this one? Yeah, the slope is whatever's in front of the x. What's the slope of this one? Did you say negative 1/5? Or did you say negative 5? Oh, no, yes, you're right. Because remember, it has to be the number in front of the x. Right, so this number becomes negative 1/5x minus 3. So whatever's in front of the x is negative 1/5. So here are the two slopes. How are they related? Perpendicular. Because first off, they have opposite signs. And then this one is 5/1, this one's 1/5, so they're perpendicular. Two y plus 4x equals 8. 5 plus 2x equals negative y. What do we do with the left example? No, we have to put it in this form. Right, we have to get rid of the 4x. So that's positive. We need minus 4x on both sides. So 2y equals negative 4x plus 8. Divide each term separately by 2. So it's negative 4 divided by 2 is 2. Plus 8 divided by 2 is 4. So the slope of this one is negative 2. What do we got to do in this one?
Divide each term by negative 1.
Okay. Now, well, first let's flip it over.
Yeah, I should do that.
Because it's easier when we see it right. Now, just because this one's negative, try never to divide by negatives. I'm trying to get you away from that. You're actually just multiplying by negative 1. Just change all the signs across the equation. Change all of these signs. This one becomes positive, this one becomes negative, and that one becomes negative. So what's the slope here? Negative 2. So since the slopes are the same, what are the possibilities? Or they can be the same line. They can be parallel or the same line. How do we distinguish them? Look at the y-intercepts. What's the y-intercept here? 4, right? And this one? Negative 5. Yes, since the slopes are the same and the y-intercepts are different, they're parallel. If they have the same everything, the same slope and the same y-intercept. And the third equation we have 2x plus 1 equals y. Y plus 3x equals 4. Okay, put the right y on the left side, so y equals 2x plus 1. To get the y by itself, we subtract 3x. Y equals negative 3x plus 4. The y's are by themselves. What's the slope here? The slope here? Are they the same?
No.
Are they negative reciprocals?
No.
So it's neither. And if you were a betting person, since the first one was parallel, the second one was perpendicular, you can guess that the last one's gonna be neither.
But you know, sometimes math quizzes like to throw us curveballs.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like I remember one time I created one and they all 5 questions and they all came out the same. So I
I
wasn't thinking,
hate when that happens.
you start doubting yourself, exactly. That's exactly what happens. As I've had students do perfect work. They just said it didn't look right, so they made it negative. You can't, no. I think they should do that they should do that on a standardized test, make them all A's. That,
No,
That would be frustrating because it would look wrong.
that would look so wrong. It would drive, I hate when that happens when it's like 5 of them.
so
in a row
the
that
only
are
people
the
that
same.
would pass are the people who never studied. I'll just make them, I'll just put them all A's and I'm done. Okay, this one. Write equation of lines. A parallel. And B perpendicular. To the graph of 4y minus x equals 20. Going through the point to negative 3. Here we have 2 of them. A, we're looking for the line parallel, and B, we're looking for the line perpendicular. Parallel and perpendicular to what? To this other line, the 4x. So we have a 4y minus x equals 20. Why is it important to know if they're parallel or perpendicular? What's that? We're not going to draw the lines. We're going to find the equation. If it's parallel, what do we know about the equations? The slopes have to be the same. If they're perpendicular, the slopes have to be negative reciprocals of each other. So this is going to find us our slopes. We have the point already. We just need a slope.
I guess I'm a little bit confused. Are we finding one equation or are we finding 2 different?
We're finding an equation of a line that's parallel to this one and one that's perpendicular to this one.
So it is 2 separate equations.
That's why it's A and B. Yes, 2 separate ones. All right, so in other words, we have to find the slope of this first line. Find M of that line, which is this line here. So add x to both sides. 4y equals x plus 20. Divide each of these by 4. We end up with y equals x over 4 plus 5. So what's our slope? No. 1 over 4, because there's an invisible 1 in front of that x. So it's 1 over 4x plus 5. It's very important. If you have 2x over 3, that's the same as 2/3 x. So whatever's in front of the x, this has to be its own number. So the slope of this first equation has to be what? Which is? Yeah, so we have, no, not the x, slope is without the x, 1/4. And it has to go through, and I had so many students to get it beautifully right, except they put the x. Now we have a point and a slope. So what do we do next? What, we want it to be in which form? Y equals mx plus b, that's the equation of a line. We have x and y, remember this is how we started off the class today. We did these kind of questions. So y is -3, m is 1/4, x is 2. We have to solve for b. Two goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 4 twice, so it's 1/2 plus b. We have a fraction and an equal sign. What do we do there? Remember, first, find the LCD. What's the LCD in this case? 2. Multiply the LCD to each term. So we have 2 times -3, 2 times 1/2, 2 times b. Since we multiplied, next one is reduce. We want to get rid of the fraction. So the 2's cancel. Multiply to get rid of the parentheses. Positive, negative is negative. 2 times 3 is 6. Then solve. So -7 equals 2b. Divide both sides by 2. So b is equal to -7/2. So y equals m. M is 1/4. X plus b. That's -7/2. And that's that equation. That equation is parallel to that other one. Now we do the same thing for the perpendicular one. What's the slope of this equation? Remember, the slope of our equation here is 1/4. It's positive. So this slope has to be negative. And flip 1/4, you get 4. It's 4/1. So we have our slope and we have our point. I'm trying to hurry up, get you out of here. Plug in your values. -3, -4 times 2. There's m, this is x, and this is y. So that. -3 equals -8 plus b. Add 8. 8's positive, so it's positive. 8 minus 3 is 5. So y equals mx plus b. M is -4 and b is +5. So that's the equation perpendicular to it. That's it. It just takes practice, but it's always the same steps whenever you're looking for equations of lengths. I'm sorry I went fast at the end. It's not that bad, I hope. All right, we'll try to finish up the chapter next class period. So I'd like to start chapter 2. Chapter 2 only has 4 sections. We can finish it next week. And then the next week after that, we do chapter 3. And chapter 3 is when we start getting into actually solving for things.